Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I have attended a handful of meetings in the chamber where the Montgomery County Council meets in downtown Rockville. The council members, all elected, full-time, serious legislators, sit behind a semicircular dais facing conference tables and rows of seats for the public. I arrived a bit early this past Tuesday, and the council was discussing community policing efforts with the chief and other officers. This was followed by some scintillating procedural interviews of candidates for the county zoning board. And in the course of these proceedings, I noticed the seats in the gallery quickly filling up. Many of those taking their seats held up signs and placards anticipating the next item on the council's agenda, the item that brought me there. Our beloved Shalom congregant and council member Andrew Friedson, who's sitting about 4 rows back next to his mother. Andrew, who represents District 1, which stretches from the D.C. border all the way out to Poolesville, introduced a resolution to, quote, address and combat anti-Semitism. The content of the resolution was to affirm the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism. You can Google it and read it for yourself. This affirmation was not meant to create a new law or ordinance for the county. Its authors never meant for it to be used as a legal apparatus. Rather, it was to be affirmed as an educational tool to help identify acts of anti-Semitism, to foster learning and rectification when such incidents occur in our community. The IHRA definition has been endorsed by 37 countries, over 300 institutions of higher learning, 200 NGOs, entities as diverse as the European Parliament and the Organization of American States, the Church of England, and the Global Imams Council. But here in Montgomery County, where 85% of all religious bias crimes are committed against Jews, 85%, in a county where Jews are only 10% of the population, there was hostile, vehement opposition to the council affirming this definition. There were no witnesses, no testimonies. Tuesday's session was not meant to be a discussion with the public, just a vote by the council members. Now, each member was given a few minutes to speak before the vote was taken, and as it became more and more apparent that it would pass, in fact, it passed unanimously, you could feel the temperature rising in the room. The last council member to speak, Evan Glass, was interrupted several times by protesters. The council president had to warn people that they would be asked to leave if they continued to shout and heckle. The protesters included several Muslims wearing traditional garb, but also a large contingent of Jews, even a few rabbis, holding signs reading, "Another Jew against IHRA," or JCRC, the Jewish Community Relations Council, doesn't represent all Jews. Could these Jews, or Muslims for that matter, really be protesting a statement on anti-Semitism? I'm quite sure that they would say that that's not what they were there to do. Anti-Semitism was not the issue, I heard them say. It was the fact that within the working definition of anti-Semitism, one of the 11 examples of what anti-Semitism might look like said the following: denying the Jewish people the right to self-determination, for example, by claiming that the existence of the state of Israel is a racist endeavor. This was the non-starter. This was the obstacle, and what all the commotion was about. Why conflate anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism? The protesters demanded. That's not the way to combat anti-Semitism in the county. The state of Israel has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, I heard others shout. I can hate Israel. I can be opposed to Israel's existence. I can even consider Israel to be a racist endeavor, but be perfectly fine with Jews and Judaism. Now, let me digress for a moment to reflect on the words we heard in this morning's Torah reading. The very first words that Abraham ever heard from God are, Lech lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladetecha el ha'aretz asher areka. Go forth from your land, from your birthplace, to the land that I will show you. Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. The Torah goes on to describe that not only will Abraham and Sarah settle in this new land, but so too will their ancestors, who will also call that place their home. Now, whether you believe that God actually spoke those words, or something perhaps less literal, the historical fact is that from antiquity to today, the Jewish people have considered that land, Eretz Yisrael, to be their ancestral homeland. And they have lived there continuously for millennia, establishing governments, minting coins, building cities and temples, authoring civilization-altering sacred texts, developing an indigenous language and culture, and after dispersions and exiles have returned in our age to reestablish a sovereign Jewish nation in that very same land. Not only did Abraham hear about this land before he heard about anything else relating to monotheism or religion or belief, but when God spoke to every single patriarch, land was among the first item mentioned. Isaac is told, Gur ba'aretz hazot ve'ehyeh imach. Dwell in this land, and I will be with you. Jacob is told, V'hashivoticha el ha'adama hazot. I will surely return you to this land. Moses is told that he's not only to free the Hebrew slaves, but also leha'aloto min ha'aretz hahu el eretz tova urchava el eretz zavat chalav udevash. That those newly freed slaves would be brought once again to that very land, good and spacious and flowing with milk and honey. Again, whatever you believe about the Bible's historicity, that's your business. That's your faith. But these texts form the foundation of a deep devotion between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. If you've been paying attention this morning, mentions of that historic allegiance between the Jewish people and the land of Israel and the city of Jerusalem are all over the Siddur, on page 98, on page 100, page 101, page 103, page 110, 111, 112, page 116, 118, 139, 149, and we haven't even gotten to Musaf yet. Many of these prayers were written ages ago in lands far away from Eretz Israel, by people heartsick with longing to return. It is frankly impossible to understand Judaism without the concept of land, without the component of Eretz Israel, just as it is impossible to speak about Judaism without Torah or without God. Now, you may feel more or less of a connection to Israel. You may have studied Torah a lot or not very much. You may believe in God strongly or not at all. But to suggest that these elements are not intrinsic to Jewish civilization would be both inaccurate and disingenuous. So when someone says, I can hate Israel but love Jews, or I can be anti-Zionist, but that doesn't make me anti-Semitic, I, for one, am deeply suspicious. Now, please don't misunderstand this. I am not saying, and I would never say, that the critique of the modern state of Israel, or its government, or its particular policies, amounts to something anti-Semitic. And guess what? The IHRA definition of anti-Semitism doesn't say that either. It does say that having expectations of Israel or making demands of Israel that one does not make of any other democratic nation in the world indeed smacks of anti-Semitism, but to hold Israel to the same standards as any other modern democracy is altogether fair and reasonable. The truth is, I woke up a few days ago with a pit in my stomach as I read about the election returns in Israel. To tell you the truth, I'm heartsick about the ascension of people like Itamar Ben-Gvir, a follower of Meir Kahane, an advocate of deporting Arabs who are not, quote, loyal to Israel, who called Reform Judaism a mockery of religion, and who has a strange devotion to the terrorist Baruch Goldstein. I am horrified that Bezalel Smotrich might have a role in the new government, an advocate of annexing the entire West Bank, a guy who calls himself a proud homophobe. I fear that these people will do damage to Israel internally, damage to Klal Yisrael, and be a blight upon Israel in the community of nations. They are intolerant extremists, not altogether different from far-right politicians gaining support in Italy, Hungary, France, and folks, I've heard, in Sweden as well. And let's not forget, in the US of A. I personally repudiate them. Now, is anyone prepared to call me an anti-Semite? The problem is that in so many places, you could never critique Israel enough. Nothing short of repudiating the existence of the state of Israel would suffice. On many college campuses, for example, anti-Zionism has become practically identical to anti-Semitism. Here's a simple way to understand it. You ready? Number one, most American Jews consider Israel to be of some relative importance to their Jewish identity. Do we all agree to that? Most American Jews consider Israel somewhat important, very important, extremely important, but some level of importance to their Jewish identity. Yes? Number two, when a club, organization, or rally, or protest bans participants with any Zionist affinities from attending, i.e., anyone who says that Israel has any level of importance in their life, what they are actually saying is that Jews are not welcome in this space. Do you follow? To put it another way, as Newsweek journalist Batya Unger-Sargon writes, if there's only room in your movement for the 3% of Jews who say they aren't pro-Israel, your movement effectively bans Jews. And this is why, in so many public spaces in our country, people are removing their kippot, hiding their Jewish stars, concealing their Jewish identity and their pro-Israel sentiments. While physical violence against Jews has certainly escalated in too many places, Barry Weiss writes that what people in progressive spaces, people who want to be allies with progressive causes, and who also care about Israel, fear much more is moral condemnation, social ostracism, and reputational vilification meted out by peers, professors, friends, and political allies. This is certainly not the same as, God forbid, shooting up a synagogue or roughing up a Hasidic Jew on the streets of Brooklyn, but it is, I believe, anti-Semitism nonetheless. I refuse to accept that the irate, histrionic, altogether disproportionate obsession with Israel is just another political or human rights issue. I will not excuse or look the other way when Jews are bullied or intimidated for having a visceral connection to our ancestral homeland. I will not allow my Zionism to be conflated with any politician or with any government. My devotion to Israel cannot be besmirched by any such entity, just as my American patriotism cannot be. The fact is that in this day and age, when you peel back the onion of anti-Zionism, what is often exposed is, in fact, anti-Semitism. The difference is becoming narrower and narrower. And that needs to be called out. That needs to be identified. That needs to be named whenever and wherever it happens. And that's why I'm proud of our county council for voting unanimously on this definition. Again, not as a legal entity, but as a way to educate people, to sensitize people, and to learn from these situations as they occur. In the Talmud, Tractate Brachot, page 5a, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai taught, Shalosh matanot tovot natan HaKadosh Baruch Hu liYisrael. God gave 3 precious gifts to the Jewish people. But wait, there's a caveat. V'chulan lo netanan ele al yedei yisurin. Each of these 3 precious gifts were given along with struggle and strife and even suffering. Eluhen, they are Torah, Eretz Yisrael, v'ha'olam haba. The Torah, the land of Israel, and the world to come. Each one comes with some struggle. Each one requires hard work. Perhaps the reason that these gifts are born of struggle is precisely because they are among the most crucial facets of our Jewish identity. They are precious because they are worth the effort, worth the struggle, worth even the suffering to protect and secure them. I am prepared to struggle for Eretz Yisrael. I am prepared to correct the record when Israel is maligned or misunderstood. And I am even prepared to struggle and suffer when Israel disappoints me and when it challenges my values. Because when you love something, or when you love someone, when it is a part of your identity, your destiny, you work for it, you labor over it, and you never, ever give up. I hope you won't ever give up on this matana tova, this extremely precious gift either. And that you support those seeking to educate our community about these critical causes for the Jewish people. With gratitude to my friend Andrew Friedson and to all those who stand up to both anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, I ask that you join in these efforts yourselves and in the ways that you see fit in our community, so that there can indeed be more peace and understanding, so that we can learn from and with each other to build a more just society. Shabbat Shalom. Please join together on page 150.